Your 30s will test every decision you made in your 20s. Your 20s feel like a rehearsal. Your 30s feel like the real performance. In your 20s, life often gives you room to experiment. You can change directions, start over, make mistakes, and still feel like you have time to fix everything. Society almost expects you to be confused. People say things like, "You're still young, you'll figure it out." And in many ways that's true. Your 20s are the decade where you explore. You try careers, relationships, lifestyles, and identities. You test what works and what doesn't. Some people chase money, some chase passion, some chase experiences, and some just drift from one year to the next without a clear direction. But something shifts when you step into your 30s. Suddenly, the decisions you made in your 20s begin to show their results, not as possibilities anymore, but as consequences. Your 30s are the decade where life starts keeping score. If you spent your 20s building skills, learning discipline, and investing in yourself, your 30s often begin to open doors. Opportunities start appearing. People trust you with bigger responsibilities. Your experience compounds. The work you put in quietly begins to pay off. But if your 20s were filled with constant distraction, avoidance, and short-term thinking, your 30s can feel like a wake-up call, because time, whether you respect it or not, keeps moving forward. In your 20s, many choices feel reversible. You can quit a job and try something else. You can move to a new city. You can experiment with different paths. Even mistakes feel temporary because you assume there's always more time. But in your 30s, the weight of those choices becomes clearer. The career you chose begins shaping your financial future. The habits you built begin shaping your health. The relationships you invested in begin shaping your emotional stability. Your 30s don't just test your ambition. They test your discipline. Think about habits for a moment. In your 20s, it's easy to ignore small habits. Staying up all night, wasting hours scrolling, skipping exercise, ignoring your finances. It doesn't seem like a big deal at the time. One late night doesn't ruin your health. One impulsive purchase doesn't destroy your finances. But habits compound. 10 years of small daily decisions quietly build a direction for your life. If you spent your 20s building discipline, waking up early, learning valuable skills, managing your money, taking care of your body, your 30s often reward you with momentum. But if your 20s were built on constant escape and procrastination, your 30s begin to expose those cracks. And this is the part nobody explains clearly when you're young. Life doesn't punish you immediately for bad decisions. It waits, then it sends the bill later. Another area where your 30s test your 20s is relationships. In your 20s, friendships often happen easily. You're surrounded by people in school, university, or early jobs. Social circles are wide, and it feels like everyone is available. You go out together, travel together, share dreams together. But as people enter their 30s, life becomes more structured. Careers become demanding. Families start forming. Priorities shift. Suddenly, the friendships that were built on convenience begin to fade. What remains are the relationships that were built on genuine connection, loyalty, and shared growth. If you invested time in building meaningful relationships in your 20s, those people often become your strongest support system in your 30s. But if your 20s were spent chasing validation or surrounding yourself with people who didn't push you to grow, your 30s can feel surprisingly lonely. Another test comes in the form of identity. In your 20s, you're allowed to experiment with who you are. You try different versions of yourself, different goals, different lifestyles. But in your 30s, people begin expecting clarity. They expect you to know what you're doing. They expect stability. And sometimes that expectation creates pressure. You look around and see people buying homes, building businesses, raising families, or reaching milestones you once imagined for yourself. And naturally, you begin asking questions. Am I where I should be? Did I waste time? Did I choose the right path? These questions can feel uncomfortable, but they're also powerful, because your 30s are not just about testing your past decisions. They're about forcing you to become intentional about your future. If your 20s were chaotic, your 30s give you the chance to rebuild with clarity. But rebuilding requires honesty. You have to look at your habits, your environment, and your priorities without excuses. You have to ask yourself difficult questions. Are my daily actions aligned with the life I want? Am I growing or just staying comfortable? Am I investing in things that will matter 10 years from now? The truth is, many people experience their biggest personal transformation in their 30s, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because reality becomes harder to ignore. By this stage, you understand something important that most people in their 20s don't fully grasp yet. Time is not infinite. You begin to see how quickly a decade can disappear. 10 years ago might feel like yesterday, and that realization changes the way you think. You start valuing focus more than excitement. You start valuing consistency more than intensity. You start realizing that success rarely comes from dramatic bursts of effort. It comes from steady discipline over long periods of time. This is why your 30s often become the decade of serious growth. People who once drifted begin taking responsibility. People who once chased every distraction begin protecting their time. People who once avoided hard work begin embracing it, not because they suddenly became different people, but because they finally understood the cost of delay. And here's the encouraging part. Even if your 20s were messy, your 30s are far from the end of your story. In many ways, they are just the beginning. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs, creators, and leaders didn't find their real direction until their 30s or even later. What matters most is not how perfect your 20s were. What matters is how honest you are with yourself now. Your 30s reward clarity. They reward focus. They reward discipline. If you choose to learn from your past instead of regretting it, your 30s can become the decade where everything begins to accelerate, because by this point, you have something extremely valuable: experience. You understand your strengths better. You understand your weaknesses. You understand what truly matters to you and what doesn't. And that awareness gives you power. The power to stop chasing things that don't align with your life. The power to invest your time into skills, relationships, and goals that actually move you forward. The power to design your life with intention instead of drifting through it. Your 30s test your 20s, but they also give you the opportunity to redefine your future. The question is not whether you made mistakes. Everyone did. The real question is whether you're willing to learn from them, because the people who thrive in their 30s are not the ones who had perfect beginnings. They're the ones who became intentional when it mattered. They stopped waiting for motivation. They built systems. They built discipline. They built a life that compounds. So if you're stepping into your 30s and feeling pressure, remember this. Pressure is not always a warning. Sometimes it's a signal that life is asking you to level up. A signal that the casual approach of your 20s is no longer enough. A signal that it's time to take ownership of the direction your life is moving. And the moment you accept that responsibility, something powerful happens. You stop comparing your timeline to everyone else. You stop worrying about what you should have done differently. And you start focusing on what you can build from this point forward. Because the truth is simple. Your 30s don't just test the decisions you made in your 20s. They also reveal the person you're capable of becoming next. And the next decade of your life will not be defined by the mistakes behind you. It will be defined by the discipline you choose today.